So welcome everyone. This is our first, as I mentioned before, Après-cours meeting for the Anglo sector. My name is Frank Furfaro. I'm the chair of the EPC committee. For those of you who are not familiar, it's the English Pedagogical Consultants. There are several of my colleagues here with me today. It's not about EPC today, it's about the Après-cours and the discussion that's going to take place in Après-cours. Just to let you know, our vision for the Après-cours is pretty much a monthly meeting for 1 hour in which we'll investigate Moodle forums and topics such as health and well-being, accessibility for our students and ourselves, anti-racism, and trauma-informed pedagogy. This is not limited to any subject area. We welcome math, English, science, and French teachers and all teachers from all the subject areas. The survey that many of you take the time to complete did reveal that there's quite a bit of need for CCB and English language arts teachers, and then the rest of the subject I mentioned. So before we get right into it, we're going to put a little feeler out there for you and just want to see how you're doing today. And if you take a few minutes, I'm about to share my screen. And if you can just have a look at this image and see which one you can relate to best. So please take a moment. So I don't mean to measure out our lives in dog years with our digital experience so far, but that's kind of the theme of what seems to be happening with that photo. And thank you all for piping in. It looks like we have a full canine spectrum of feelings about where we're at these days. And thank you again for doing this. Vahan Bedros, who's also here today, he's gonna be sharing with us some of his experiences online, just to give you an idea of what's going on today. And also the team from RECIT is gonna walk us through a small presentation. So welcome once again, everyone, to our first Après-cours session. We hope you'll be tuning in for more in the coming months and likely years ahead. And hopefully at some point, this will be a combination of a digital realization and a personal one once this pandemic is over. So thanks again.
Thank you, Frank, for getting us all together today. So I'll keep it really brief, not to overcomplicate things, but in regards to online working, I've been working on the hybrid model and pushing the online format on my students for quite some time now. Even before this pandemic started, actually, I've been trying to get my students to be more digital, primarily because of it makes things a lot easier in regards to sharing material and all of your class work. So for those of you who are getting into the habit of working online, one of the first things that I can suggest for you to do is to take all of the resources you have, everything that you have activity related, reading related, and create digital versions of them. That way you can add them all into Teams and your students can have easy access to it. Saves you a lot of time from having to constantly print multiple documents, having to share that with the students. Some are not here, they miss the material, they have to come back the next day, restart. So if you have a digital version of all of your material, that would definitely be the best way to start with your online classes. Secondly, in regards to organizing this hybrid model, online model, now there's no perfect method to this system. The best thing I find is to be flexible with it. The more rigid of a timetable you create for yourself, the more stressful it becomes for you and for the students as well. And then the more difficult it becomes to progress through it, because let's face it, when it's online, we don't have any control over what the students are actually doing. Sometimes they turn off that camera. We don't know if they're actually doing the work. So we always kind of have to run after them to a certain extent. So keep that in mind and try to keep your online teaching timetables at a very flexible manner. One method that I found works very well for myself and my students, on Teams, I created one team group for each of the classes. At the moment, I am teaching English Secondary 4 and 5 in DBE at the same time. So in one classroom, I have Secondary 4s and Secondary 5s. So when it comes to that, I created a team channel for each of them, secondary 4 and secondary 5. After that, for each module, I created a channel of their own in each team. And what I found could be very helpful as well is to put literally all material in there in numerical order for your students to follow through each document one by one. At the beginning of class, you have all of your PowerPoints that are already on Teams. And from there, you can share your screen. Your students can follow the PowerPoints and any other lectures or materials that you wish to go over with your students. Then after that, you kind of give them their own freedom to continue the work and the exercises in the numerical order that you have uploaded into Teams. That being said, we can't give them too much freedom either, or else nothing will ever get done. So we have to give them a certain deadline. For example, when I give my students, once we're done with the material of the day and the lectures and all resources that I want them to understand, I tell them, now start doing exercises 1 to 3. You have until the end of tomorrow's class to complete these exercises. Those students that have completed that work, I make a point of them to send me their work, do the corrections with them online, with the whole class, everyone listening in, everyone freely asking their questions as we go along. After that, I have no choice but to begin with the next topic. If the students have not completed any particular work at that point, well, then they have to kick themselves in the butt and kind of push themselves a little bit forward because they're not in the classroom, ultimately. I can't be that person that's always next to them. How far did you get? How much have you completed? Do you need help with something? So that is one of the difficulties that I have been experiencing with this online model, is really making sure if the students are doing their work. But by giving them this freedom in this very straightforward numerical order to go through all of the exercise and the materials and what I am expecting them to have accomplished before the time of the exam, I find it's really working in a very positive way with the students. It's giving them that freedom to kind of dive into the work on their own, out of the fire, into the frying pan. So I find that this model is working very well, at least for English classes. Now I understand that math, especially history, might be a little bit difficult to work with this type of model. But for English classes, at least, this has been working very smoothly with my students and myself. Another thing to mention is because of the fact that they are online, they're not in class more than half of the time. As I said, it becomes very difficult to follow through with them on the work that they need to complete. So that's why when you're giving them any type of resources and activities to do, they have to be very specific work that's directed to what they need to know and understand by the time it comes for their exam. We do not have that leisure to do extra work with them just to fill the time or to get them to be better in a specific topic related to the exam. That's the only downfall that comes with the online world. For me, at least, up until now, that is one of the things I found difficulty with. But all in all, it's a very interesting world that we're moving towards. And I have to stress that first and foremost, the one thing that us as educators and as teachers that we need to do before jumping into this online model is to have a strong understanding of how Teams functions. Because on the first class of each module, sometimes new students come in, sometimes you have, you're starting with a new class in general. If we do not have a strong understanding of Teams, we will have a lot of difficulty progressing forward in the classroom. That is why I highly suggest that if none of you have had the time to experiment with Teams, by all means, you can sign in with other accounts as well, besides your EMSB account, and just kind of go in with your own personal account and just have fun with Teams. Click things, see what happens, make mistakes, it doesn't matter. And other than that, Frank and the Andro team have done multiple sessions on how to get better at using Teams. So those really helped me out as well to understand all the different features that come with Teams That way, on the first day of classes, I can relay that same information to my students to ensure a smooth progression for the rest of the semester. So that's generally my experience of the hybrid and the online model. It's been quite smooth. Everything's digital. I don't need to print anything anymore. Saving the earth, one online class at a time. So yeah, if you have any questions, I'd be more than happy to help you out.
Thank you, Vahan. I just wanted to mention to everyone here, yes, Teams is an EMSB specific platform, but a lot of what Vahan said translates quite well into Google Classroom or Moodle and the rest of it, especially when you talked about being specific and intentful and focused to get students ready for those exams. We don't have that much time for any kind of lengthy question period, but if there's anything that really stood out that Vahan said and you have a question for him, we'll allow maybe a minute for that before we continue.
Awesome. Well, thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Vahan.
Feedback.
We'll be in touch, trust me.
Perfect.
All right, so the next activity that we had planned for tonight is to shuttle you off into breakout rooms. Of course, the whole purpose of the Après-cours is to bring teachers together, to get you guys networking, talking about what's working, what's not working, helping you troubleshoot together, because we can't meet together physically this year. So we're doing the next best thing, which is meeting together online. So I have set up the breakout rooms. I am going to open them now. In each breakout room, no need to stress, you're going to have a consultant there with you who's guiding you through a couple of reflection questions so we can get to know one another and like what our situations are. And so we're going to be in the breakout rooms for about 20 minutes. Hello, everybody. I hope you enjoyed getting a chance to chat with other educators since we don't get to see each other face to face as much anymore. So Mark and I are going to run through a mini lesson on online and hybrid learning design. So this resource lives on our, this resource lives on our PD a la carte page. Mark, are we ready?
Always.
Always ready.
What are we talking about?
The RECIT motto, always ready.
Yeah.
COVID hit, we were swamped, but we were ready, dealing. Okay, so I'm Emily, and Mark's gonna like run through this with me here today. We're members of that IC team, along with Abby and Joanne. So this is our other website. If you're interested, you will have the link there for you. Okay, so when COVID hit, basically what we need to remember is that we already have strong content knowledge. You guys are experts in the subjects that you teach. We have strong pedagogical knowledge for doing the like in-person teaching. And by now we've also learned a little bit about online and hybrid teaching, what's working, what's not working. Really what COVID is forcing us to think about is developing our technological knowledge skills and how we can bring these three different types of knowledge together into like a perfect symbiosis so that we can really maximize student learning in this online context. So there's this lovely little video about TPAC here in this presentation, should you wish to watch it.
And it's about having balance, because technology will inform content and it will also inform pedagogical knowledge and vice versa. So we really have to find that balance, and you all have knowledge of all three, and it's just a question of putting them all together and making them work. And things work differently for different people, so you shouldn't compare yourselves to anyone.
So with that being said, in terms of thinking about our three different types of knowledge and bringing them together, Mark and I have scoured the interwebs and read research. We've brought together our top 5 tips for teaching online and hybrid courses, because obviously we were not trained in how to do this. So we've had to look to the experts, people who are doing it, people who are figuring out how to make it work. So tip number 1 is obviously referring to that research. So we have compiled four main research models that can help us think about online and hybrid teaching and how to make it work. So the first one is the community of inquiry framework, depicted by this lovely like circle thing here. And basically it involves 3 different types of presence in an online or hybrid classroom. So the first one, that is obviously the thing we miss the most, is the social presence. We miss seeing our students in person. So how do we make sure that our class is engaging, that people have a chance, our students have a chance to work with one another, get to know one another, and that also our students feel our presence, even though sometimes for some students it's going to be through a screen. The other 2 types of presence that we have are teaching presence. So teaching presence is all about engagement with goals and direction. So that's like how we're designing the course. And then the last one is how we're getting students to engage with content, and that's called cognitive presence. So we've designed this slideshow so that it's interactive and you can kind of go through it at your own pace and learn more about each of the different models.
Yeah, so being in an online situation, your presence as a teacher, so the teaching presence is extremely important because you need to lead people who are online and in class at the same time. You have all of my admiration, all of it. It's really difficult. And the social presence, well, you need to interact with the students at the same time and try to find ways for them to interact together. And that's not always easy, but you have to just be conscious of it. And cognitive presence, I mean, there is something we know about Zoom fatigue, we know about cognitive overload. So you have to be aware of that too, that it's a different way of teaching, as I know you're aware of now, but that maybe you can't put as much stuff on them at the exact moment. So synchronous, asynchronous teaching, that's very important. And to try to balance the 3.
Well, we're going to come back to all of those things too as we go through. So the second thing is the RACE model. This is another interesting discovery in our research. I think like when the pandemic started, we were really panicking a lot about like, oh my gosh, I don't have like digital resources for learning. And I think now we've got a better handle on that. And so we need to kind of think about these other areas of the model. So like what kinds of activities are we planning for our students, making sure that we're creating like a variety of activities. How are we providing opportunities for our students to assess their work? Are we building in lots of formative assessment? Are we making sure that all the learning objectives are really clear from the get-go? Providing more of that like encadrement is going to be really key for online learning because we're not going to have that same in-person touch. We need to be a little bit more upfront and intentional about those things. The last piece of the puzzle is support. So that means both pedagogical support and technological support. So making sure there's a spot in our LMS where our, Google Classroom, Moodle, Teams, whatever, where students know that they can find out how, different tools work, or maybe there might be a glossary of terms that you're encountering in your class, of frequently asked questions, stuff like that.
The thing is, you have to start with the activity, right? That's the basis of teaching. Students come into class, they need to do some sort of activity, whether it be online or in person. And the other 3 serve that activity. Now, that doesn't mean that every time you make a pedagogical and andragogical activity that you need new resources. Those resources can stay the same. What you're trying to aim for are self-directed resources, places where they can go and they can take care of it themselves. The evaluation does not have to be a sit-down exam. It can be an exit slip. It can be a, hey guys, you want to tell me about it in the chat? It can be any sort of little thing just to make sure that you're on the right track. And support doesn't have to be crazy either. They can send you an email so you can answer it later when it's convenient for you. If a student raises his or her hand and you answer that, well, that's support. So it's a question of just thinking about these 4 aspects and knowing that they all sort of come around the activity.
All right, Matthew, this one's for you. UDL, your fave. So universal design for learning guidelines. We want to make sure that we're designing our learning experience so that from the get-go, it's going to be accessible to all of our learners. So thinking about, and I think technology really allows us to go in new directions on this in terms of providing multiple modes of engagement, representation, action, and expression, we can offer more choices to our students to help them get really engaged with the content and to get engaged with one another. So I think it's really like exciting what we can do there. Math is not a yes.
So, you know, students need to know what they're doing. The how is, have I done this before? Can I still do it now? If I just add a little bit of knowledge to something I already know, will I be able to do it? And why? You know, how does that tie into the whole curriculum of the course?
Last one, 6 different types of learning. So the only thing to mention here is making sure we're having that variety. So we're having opportunities for students to acquire knowledge, to practice, to collaborate, produce in making our lesson plans, maybe, you know, like color coding the different activities to make sure that we're having that variety in the lesson, but maybe also over the course of the semester. So students are making sure that we're making sure students are kind of developing a variety of skills in different ways in our lessons.
Yeah, you don't have to do all of them all the time, but it's nice to know that there are different ways of approaching a subject or something like that. Acquisition means that they're just acquiring knowledge, but collaboration means they may be working with somebody else. Practicing means that they might just be doing math problems over and over again. So a nice variety.
We will rush through the rest of these.
We will.
The second tip that we have is trying to put ourselves in our students' shoes. So taking an online class ourselves can be really beneficial for learning about what we like and what we don't like in an online experience or a hybrid experience. It doesn't have to be something academic. It could be something totally for you, totally personal, like a hobby that you're interested in. It doesn't have to be live either. It could be something you're doing kind of on demand, accessing like a YouTube tutorial. And kind of thinking about that, reflecting on that, would I want to be a student in my own class if I were organizing this class this way?
It's a new way of teaching. So going out there and finding out what other people are doing, whether they are actual teachers or just people talking about wine tasting. I don't know why I said that, but yeah, it's 5:22. I know why.
The third thing is establishing structure and direction. So that could mean like developing class norms, which I'm sure so many of you have done. Developing a routine, like we start with a check-in, we end with an exit ticket. Keeping things consistent. So that could mean like the look of your lessons that you're designing. You're using like the same PowerPoint theme or something like that. Chunking our classes too is going to be really key. So breaking it into smaller parts so that it's more manageable, especially if you're doing hybrid, because our attention spans for the in-person versus online, it is so different. And yeah, I already mentioned, I think, ongoing self-assessments, but having those times to check in with students individually and see where they are in their learning goals or where you think they are is also going to be really helpful. All these things are clickable too, so feel free.
Yeah, exactly. And if you look at them very carefully, you'll notice that these are all meant in a way to make your lives easier. Because when a student understands what the norm is or can just fall right into the routine, if things are time blocked so that you can move around your classroom knowing that, you know, the online cohort is doing activity A and the in-class cohort is doing activity B, it makes things better for you. Ongoing self-assessments, you don't have to be there. They can check it out themselves. Go ahead.
For sure. The fourth one is keep it simple. So not everything needs to be synchronous. We don't always need to be living in this red zone of video conferences. We can also leverage, you know, a forum for asynchronous discussions. We can create some screencasts for students to watch at different times. We can have students working in collaborative documents together. Because I think a lot of the time, you know, especially adult ed, we have like really long classes. And if they're all online and we're all together in that Zoom or whatever it is for that time, I think we're all going to go a little crazy. So building on that, layer in those tech tools slowly. You know, don't introduce like a ton of new tools with each class, like one per class to get everybody used to using these new things, and model that tech when you're introducing it. Explain how students can get support if some things are not working for them.
Tech has to be part of your planning. There's no way around it. You need to show, you have to be very explicit in what you're showing and what you're going to be using. Because if the students don't know how to use the tech the way you need them to use it, it becomes very difficult. So it has to be part of your planning. And that means you're going to lose a little bit of time. But an old teacher friend of mine once said, sometimes you have to lose time to gain it. So it's worth it taking the time at the beginning so that further on, things move much more smoothly.
And paper isn't the enemy either. Giving your students a break from looking at the screen and kind of writing things on paper too. We're the tech people, we still love paper. Paper is great. So don't be scared about using paper either. Last one, embrace iteration. Kelly's like, yes, I have my Post-it notes. Me too. So in embracing iteration, there will always be tech issues when we are using tech. This is a given of our lives. That's okay, but it's a great opportunity to model for our students how we solve problems when they are occurring and how we're gonna, get back up and keep the lesson flowing. So when we're running into these different issues, and even with each lesson, soliciting feedback from our students about the learning experience can be so helpful for improving. And also jumping into other people's classes or having them come and sit in on your class and offering feedback can be so helpful too. If you have the emotional span to do that, I encourage you to do that. If you have the time to do that, go ahead. But basically, the thing we need to remember is that it's going to be continuous little improvements over time. With reflection, we're going to continue to get better. With practice, we're going to get better. And there are more resources for you to explore here too. That's it.
You don't need to compare yourself to anybody. You're doing a great job and we thank you for it.
Yes. Frank, we invite you to wrap us up.
Great. I feel the need to be kind of digitally duveyed here. I'm not sure if the rest of you feel the same way as it's getting quite dark. Thank you so much for attending our first Après-cours. We tend to have more of these in the future. Thank you, RECIT and the colleagues from EPC, English Pedagogical Consultants, and especially the teachers for taking the time to really hone in on some of the things that you've experienced in your groups. And Vahan, I think, mentioned a lot of things that were repeated in some of the breakout groups. We're going to see those notes soon enough. Just as a reminder, there will be another Après-cours coming to you real soon. I think it's going to be directed more at SIS and SVIS teachers, if I'm not mistaken. And this team is also going to put together another Après-cours as soon as possible, as soon as we compile the information to make it subject specific, more direct for your needs. And that way you might be alone in the room, but you're not alone when it comes to the online landscape that we find ourselves in. So the support will be there for you. So thanks again for joining us. We really hope to get to see a lot of these faces again in the coming weeks and months.